I'm giving a talk today about mastering reactive programming with RxJS. I would like to ask you a question. Who is doing reactive programming today? Good. Okay, so before I start, I try to introduce myself. I'm Saif Jerbi, so my short name is Saif Jerbi. I'm from Tunisia. I'm working for Vermeg. So Vermeg is an international company that provides softwares for banks and insurance company. I belong to the R&D department in Vermeg, which provide a platform called Palmyra. So all of our products in Vermeg are made and built on top of Palmyra platform. And my team provide a front-end web IDE that let you create Angular application with drag and drop, just configuring the behavior and the logic behind your screens. And by clicking on a button, you will get a fully generated app with the full configuration, with the full logic, etc. So in my team, because we are generating a code that will be used by developer or just will be built and deployed to production, we care about what we are generating. So Angular became with Rx, which is a library that provide reactive programming for JavaScript. And what we are generating is based on Rx and also in NGRX. So we are taking care about what we are using. So when you, when you type on Google reactive programming, you will find that reactive programming is a declarative paradigm concerned with data streams and propagation of change. This is very general. You will also find a website which is ReactiveX, which is talking about also reactive programming as an asynchronous programming with observable streams. So ReactiveX, it was a project that defined how to do reactive programming, and there are a lot of extensions for this library for different programming languages. So you will find RxJava, RxJS, Rx.NET, etc. So whatever you are using, you can use Rx library. The main concepts in RxJS, in this talk I will focus only on RxJS. So the main principles of Rx are observables, subjects, static functions, operators. Also we find schedulers, but in this talk I will not talk about schedulers. So let's start by observables. So observables are a sequence of events. It's a primitive type that contains a sequence of events. It can contain 0 to n values. These events or data are pushed over time, and they can be cancelable, and also they are lazy. So with observables, you have to call observables. You have to subscribe to observables to get the data. It's like functions. You define a function, and this function do nothing till you call it. So to subscribe to an observable, you have subscribe method, and you will get the value, and you do what you want with this value. Also, you can call subscription to handle errors. And finally, if you want to know when the observables are completed, you can also handle this. But in generally, developers are using the subscription by this way. I say that observables are cancelable. So to cancel an observables, you have to initiate variables that contain this subscription, and later in your code, you have to unsubscribe. And since this time, you will not get notified about new values. Okay, this is how to consume observables. But developers may ask, how can I push new data or events on these observables? There are something called subjects, and there are different types of subjects in Rx. So the first one is subject. So I have a subject and I have two subscribers that will consume my data. So the first one is subscribing. My subject is emitting data, so I'm getting notified about this data. When I get another subscriber and my subject push new data, the two subscriber will get this data. But the first one, the second subscriber didn't get the first one. This is how subject work. So subject doesn't maintain the previously emitted data. You get only the data starting from when you are subscribing to this subject. There is another type, which is behavior subject. Behavior subject, I will take the same example. So I get the first subscriber. My behavior subject is emitting two data, so 2 times. And I have a second subscription, so my second subscription get the second data. So after that, it will get, of course, the shared data between the subscriber. So behavior subject will keep the last emitted data. So when you are subscribing, you will get also the last emitted data and all the data that will be emitted starting from your subscription. Sorry. Another type of subjects called replay subject. So the same scenario. I have the first subscriber. My replay subject is emitting first data, the second data, and I have the second subscriber is coming. He will get the first data and the second data, and of course, the last will be shared. So replay subject, when you are initiating a replay subject, you will say how much data this replay subject will keep. So all the subscribers will get notified about previous number of data that you are initiating. The last type is async subject. So the async subject, I have a subscriber. My async subject is emitting data. I'm not notified, but I will be notified only with the latest or the last emitted values. And after that, my async subject will complete. So async subject is used when you want to just notify your subscriber by only the last emitted values. So when it completes, it will emit the data for the subscriber. I don't know. Honestly, I didn't use it async subject. I didn't have the use case to use it. But I'm using a subject, replay subject, and behavior subject in my apps. Now let's see some code how to define a subject. So subject is just called the constructor. The subject is consumed as an observable. Just the thing that is odd is you can push on this subject in order to avoid that the consumers can push on this subject, because you wanna handle who is pushing on this subject. You may expose it as an observable. So it exposes a method which is called as observable. So for example, if you want to initiate this subject and provide an API that can access on this subject, you just return your subject as an observable. After that, you just call next, and the data will be pushed on this subject, and all the subscribers will be notified by this data. So I said that observables are sequence of events or values that are emitted over time. When we say sequence, we say also collections. So observables are collections of data or events that are emitted over time. When we say collections, we say operators. So when I have a collection, I need to have some operators to handle the data in these collections. So there are operators for filtering, for transforming this data, accumulating this data, joining, and more. In JavaScript, you can get the example of arrays. Arrays are collections. We have filter, map, reduce, and other operators that are available on the array object. But in observable, it's the same thing. You have operators that you can use in order to add some logic to transform your data in these observable streams, or filter your data, also reducing. And I have an example here. I have an array that contains 4 values. In JavaScript, it's synchronous, so it will apply these operators and return me the value. In observables, they are asynchronous, so I have to subscribe to this observable to get the same result. There are also static functions that let me initiate an observable based on values, on available values. For example, if I want to initiate an observable from an array, I have from function that help me create an observable that contains this data. RxJS provides more than 100 operators today. So also it provides a way to create your operator. You can refactor your operator and group it onto a new operator that you define to handle a synchronous and asynchronous process in your stream. In this talk, I chose to share with you my experience with observables, with RxJS, by showing you some example of code that I'm using. And I think all of you have used JavaScript to develop, maybe jQuery also. And I let you imagine how to do that with vanilla JavaScript. So here I have an example of a pagination bar. I have a data grid, and I want to provide to my users a pagination bar. And when the user will switch between the different page of my collection, I will go to my API in order to fetch the data. My data grid is lazy, and every time he is moving from page to page, he will call the API. So with observable, you just observe the page change on your pagination bar. After that, you have to use an operator called switchMap in order to do a synchronous call to your backend API to fetch the data. And why using switchMap? Because switchMap, it will wait for your API call, but if the user have changed the page when the first call is not completed, switchMap will cancel the first call. So imagine that you are clicking next, and your API is waiting for the first page, but the user want to go to the fourth page. So switchMap will cancel the previously emitted request and just handle the last one. Here I have another example. It's I'm observing input text widgets in which user is typing, and I wanna send request in order to fetch value based on what user will fill in his text box. So I have an observable of input text. I'm calling with switchMap, but I have an operator which is called debounce time. Because imagine that every key press, I will request the server. But user, in reality, user, he won't fetching data every key pressed. He want to fill a query. He want to say Warsaw. So debounce time will wait until debounce time will wait the time that you are providing. Here I have 300 milliseconds. So it will ignore all the emitted values until this time is consumed and emit the last value. So what makes sense? Imagine now that my input text need in my request, I need to handle only queries that contains more than 3 characters, or starting from 3 characters. So I want to filter my emitted value from my input text, and I want to check if the query length is more than 2 characters. So we can use just filter operator. So in filter you will get the different emitted data, but it will apply a function that will be evaluated. If it returns true, your data will continue. If if returns false, it will be ignored. Imagine now that I have another requirement. For the same input text, I will check if the query that will be sent is then distinct than the previous one, because user can type ABC and just my request to ABC is handled. After that, he added a character and he removed it before that I handle this request. So I have the same value. Okay, my debounce time, it's okay. My query have more than 2 characters, but the value of this data is the same than the previous one. So there are no need to go to my backend because the user have already the data in front of him. Another examples you may find is requesting a server to save my form. I have a form and I have a save button, and I want to, when the user click on this save button, I will request my backend. I will not use here switch map, but I will use another operators. It's exhaust map. So exhaust map, why I'm using exhaust map? Because if the user click it twice on the click button, on the save button, I don't want to send 2 requests on my backend, and I don't want to cancel my previous request, the first request that was sent. So I will use this operator because this operator will ignore all the coming data on my observables until the first one or the previous one is completed. So the first click will be sent to the backend, and either the user have clicked many times on this button, I will just handle only one request. There is another observable that is well used. It's called MergeMap. So imagine you have to display a table that contains items to be validated by a user, and you have actions on different rows of your data table, and the user will click validate or reject. So, and you will use the same service that will be called to the backend, and every time you will pass pass the clicked data. So I have here MergeMap because I don't want to cancel my previous request, and I don't want to ignore the newest request, but I have to wait that all my requests are handled and my API has returned value. So MergeMap will open different streams in parallel and handle when each stream is returned, you will be being notified. Before I will just add another example here. Here the order of requests are not important, but imagine that you have to keep the order of the different requests to be handled. There is another operator which is called concat_map. So concat_map will do the first request, and for the different event emitted, he will postpone them and keep the order until the previous request to be will complete. I'm also doing some backend development, and develop with Node.js. So I use it RxJS also with Node.js. So I have an example for you. In Node.js, you can fork different process. You can load a module and fork it into a separate process. And to communicate between the different process, the main process and the forked ones, you use events because it's events driven. So you can register a callback function, but I like registering on my events observables. So here I'm creating an observable which is called message, and my source will be the forked process, and I will handle the message event. So every time my forked process push an event, it will be handled on my observable. And also, imagine that my child process is emitting a message. Sometimes say it's successful, sometimes say it's failure. And I want to handle the different task, successful task and the different failure task. So the same observable, will be used twice. I will get two other observable. The first one will filter on the content of my message, success, and the second one will filter on my failure message. Here we have another operator, or this is can be used as an operator or also as a static function. So here, the same example, I have 3 forked process, and for each process, I'm observing the exit event. And I want to say that my full process will be considered as completed if my forked process, all my forked process have exited. So here I'm using fromEvent as a static function to observe or to create an observable that observing exit event for each process, and zip will subscribe to each observable and will emit a value only if all these observable has completed. After that, I'm using a pipe and getting the different value emitted with my observables, and I will transform it to completed to say just completed. There is another operator that I like to use. It's bind node callback. In order to transform my code into reactive with Node.js, and in order to use RxJS everywhere in my code, the official API of Node provides some libraries, some utilities like FS, and these libraries provide the functions, provide the callback functions, and some other provide promises. So you can convert your callback function into an observable, and also you can convert your promises into an observable in order to use the different operators. So bind node callback, it will transform, in this example, the fs.read file, which is an asynchronous callback function, into an observable. And after that, I will just call my created observable every time I wanna do a read file. And the data will be returned into my observable, and I can use all the different operators provided and can be used with observables. Honestly, if we will do examples with all operators of RxJS, we have to maybe 1 or 2 days to talk about that. RxJS provides more than 100 operators. For transformations, there are buffer operators, group by if you wanna get your data grouped by some key, pairwise if you wanna get always your previous data and the current data emitted in order to compare, for example. There are scan also. There are a lot of transformation operators that can be used with RxJS. Filtering also. So in my examples, I just use it filter. And RxJS provides a lot of operators that, for example, take while, or take until. This, for example, you are watching or subscribing to an observable, and in your observable, you want to just take the 2 or the 3 first emitted values. So you can use take, and you fill the number of data that you want to handle, or you can take while another observable emit, or take until another observable emit. So you want to take your data until I have another observable that will emit and say stop. Also, you can use skip while, skip until with the same logic. You can skip the different events while another observable is emitting, or skip until. You can use the last operator to get the last emitted value, or first to just getting the first emitted value. Throttle and audit, there are a lot of observable, and I invite you to go to discovering them. To join also different stream, we have seen zip operator, but there are also combine latest. So combine latest, every time one of my observables is emitting, I will fire my stream and getting the latest data of this different observable. Concat and fork join race, for example, I'm observing 3 or 4 observable, and I wanna just handle the first one who is emitting. So race, it will just return the first emitted value. There are 2 websites that you can visit in order to learn about RxJS. There are rxjs.dev and learnrxjs.io. Honestly, I used learnrxjs.io because it's provide for each operator there are 2, 3, 4 examples for that, and you can get expired. You can get inspired for that. I hope that I introduced RxJS in new way, because if you search on YouTube, you will find a lot of video. There are Ben Lesh, who is doing great talks. Ben Lesh is the lead of this library. He's doing a great talk to explain how to use RxJS. I tried to fill some examples in order to keep it simple for you and to see where we can use it and why you have to use it, because it simplifies the way that we are reading our code. So thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. This is my first time in ConFrontJS. Also my first time in Poland. Last July I was in Ukraine giving a talk in Odessa.js, and this time is for the first in Poland. Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Okay,
just
so it's Saif
selfie with you.
Jerbi, yes? Oh, we got a selfie. I'm going to photobomb your photobombing
Thank
your
you.
selfie. One question. We have time for one question for Jerbi. Saif.
Saif, yeah.
Saif, because the name was written backwards. Anybody before we go to lunch? I cannot see. Yes? Okay, here we go.
Okay, I know we have almost no time, but I would like to just ask, how do you compare debugging these observables and the Rx with this like ordinary synchronous code? Debugging case is much more difficult to debug the code. If something goes wrong, I played a little bit, and I struggle with debugging sometimes. So.
Hello, hello? Here, use this.
Okay. So,
to zdejmować. You don't know, because it's speaking Polish? Okay. Turn this off and give this to me.
So,
it says that it's on. We won't just us. We won't just us. Turn back on. And hello, hello. Hello. Naprawdę?
what happens?
Hello? Magic. Oh. One more time. We won't still. Oh. Hello? No. Hello. Inne. Oh, closer. You have another one. Closer button. It's on. I think. No, it's not. Okay. You have it.
Hello? It's okay. So there is an operator you can use, which is called a tap. So tap will not transform your data, will not filter your data. It's just when you have to do side effects on your stream, you can use tap. You can do cancel.log, or you can do some breakpoints to see what's happened with your streams. So tap is well used when debugging. Is it okay?
Thank you. That's your answer. Thank you very, very much. We don't have time for more questions right now, but maybe when we come back. We have now 40 minutes for lunch, everyone. So we're coming back at 13:30. Thank you very, very much. Fantastic. And welcome to Poland.